Okay, World Civ. All right, we continue our work today. Where we're going is we talked about last time, Gregory and Charlemagne. And Charlemagne's father was Pepin. And between Pepin and Charlemagne, you get this very interesting sort of situation where the jurisdiction, the sort of informal jurisdictions that the Bishop of Rome created began to really sort of develop under Gregory, get formalized in huge ways. I mean, when Charlemagne gets crowned emperor by the Pope, that's something that just goes down through history and becomes a big deal. So what we've got is we want to talk today about two very interesting types of government that developed out of these two characters. And one is this, this role of the bishop, and eventually the rise of what we call the papacy, the Pope. And then here we have eventually the development of the Holy Roman Emperor and a person who's, both of these are elective monarchies. You rule for life, but when you die, there's an election, okay? And so this is what makes Western civilization very complex in terms of like comparing it to Chinese, East Asian civilization, especially with China, very stable system. You have nothing like this where a bishop rises up to be a head of state and, these ideas, the West becomes more complicated. It's moving geographically, its power centers, and then also its intellectual centers move a lot, and then fundamentally it develops different ways of doing good government, which eventually yield up to the revival of republics in the modern world. So this is what we're doing. So it's a fun lecture today. It's fun. And I'll try and go fast, but this is some of the most fun stuff we got going. First of all, is the Pope the Pope in Rome is the Bishop of Rome. That's his title. Okay, he's the Bishop of Rome, but he is also a head of state. He's not just a religious figure. He actually rules a country. The Vatican, which is this part here, is in Rome. It's inside of Rome, but at the same time, it's an independent country. It's not part of Rome. It's not part of Italy. It's an independent country, the Vatican. And so the Pope is a head of state. The Prime Minister of England comes over to America, and he is not a head of state, or she is not a head of state. There's a whole different protocol for her or him. But the Pope shows up. Pope is a head of state, so there's a very, this is the highest level protocol for those guys. So we have to keep this in mind. And this is where we're going, is how do you get to a situation where, look who's behind the desk and look who's, hey, and then this guy here this is a cardinal. He's got that little belt and stuff. And who these cardinals are, they are the scholar bureaucracy. And he is like the head scholar bureaucrat. And these popes are highly educated, especially when you get into the 20th century with our most recent popes. Here's Pope Francis with Donald Trump. Pope criticizes Trump's policy on separating immigrant children. This is CNBC. This is Reuters. This is very important in world politics today, what the Pope thinks. It does not matter to the Reuters and CNBC what your pastor thinks or what my pastor thinks. It matters, though, what the Pope thinks. And because the Pope is a very powerful figure in Western civilization. And so that's what we're talking about, where this comes from. This is His Excellency, the Most Reverend Christophe Pierre, Apostolic Nuncio to the United States. He's the ambassador. He has ambassadorial rank. He stands as an ambassador from any other country. He is the Pope's ambassador. And he has a palace, ambassadorial house on this right there in Washington, D.C., And maybe the most powerful Pope we've had in maybe forever is this Pope that has now been sainted, John Paul II, St. John Paul II. And his work with Ronald Reagan and the fall of USSR is Soviet Russia is one of the most amazing stories of the 20th century. It's like here's a pope who comes from Poland and then has a Polish pope. And here's the deal, guys, is that the guy's got no army. He's got nothing that counts for political power in any sort of normal way. It's a completely different function of civic power that this person has. But you work with Ronald Reagan. Reagan knew how to use him. They worked together. They had a sort of shared thing. And John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the extraordinarily untold story of the 20th century, that's actually being told by quite a lot of people. But it's this relationship which brings down the Soviet Union. So we're talking about real important stuff. Now, let's step back. Okay, go back into history. That's the Pope. So we're going to look at the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, these two positions. Let's start with where they both sort of come from, is that you've all, Lyle the Viking, you get destabilization. Everything that Charlemagne had created in the year 800 or so, by the year 900, 950, is really sort of falling apart. Okay, falling apart in many ways, the church and the state. And to pull it back together as a state is the rise of a guy named Otto, okay? And he begins the process of creating what will eventually be called the Holy Roman Emperor. And Otto gets his power as an elective monarchy. All these different regions of what we now call Germany and various places in Europe actually they were independent powers, and they collectively put together a type of emperor figure who is, remember, a king above kings, a government above governments, and so they elect him, okay? And so here, illustration of the electors, Archbishop of Cologne, so you get these powerful church figures, Archbishop of Mainz, Archbishop of Trier, but then you also get a count, and then a duke, the Duke of Saxony. This is a very powerful position. The Reformation is going to be a lot tied to that. A margrave, and then, of course, another king of Bohemia. These people all get together, and technically it's always you have thousands of years here, so this thing doesn't work in any one way, but there's an elective monarchy. And we saw this is a type of thing that goes back into Rome and stuff like this. Remember the Vox Populi and how Gregory was elected by the people calling out his name. And so this is it's a sort of senate of leadership, very tight nobility, who then elect a person to be their leader. And it isn't term limited. It's not like a consul in the Roman Republic. It's not term limited. Here we have it later. This thing goes on for a long time. See, here you have 8 electors, Trier, Cologne, Mainz, Bohemia, Bavaria, Saxony, Brandenburg, and the Palatinate. These guys here are the electors, right? And there's the Holy Roman Emperor with his globe and cross. Now, the title that comes down eventually into the 20th century is Kaiser. And Kaiser comes from the term Caesar. It's a Greek-German version. And this is the last Kaiser. I forgot that's 1918. He abdicates. And so we don't have a Kaiser anymore. And so the Holy Roman Empire and the idea of a elective monarchy dies or ends with this guy. So grand history to that. Very interesting stuff, but we'll not be able to go into much. Now, let's talk about the other elective monarchy, which develops also after the Vikings had sort of destabilized everything, is this elective monarchy in which cardinals elect a pope, okay? I gotta work on my PowerPoints. And this actually gets, because it still continues and was written down, this is the papal election decree of 1059. It is the oldest still functioning constitution in world government. Okay. Governments change, constitutions change, the way things do things change, but the idea of the way you elect the Pope, an elective monarchy, is brand new in 1059, and it still functions today. Present Pope, he will die in your lifetime, and you will find this system going on. Okay, so let me just explain it really quickly. Is the way this works is that a guy named Leo IX, had become Pope because the Holy Roman Emperor actually pushed him onto Rome, and he was there to reform it because you had bad stuff going on, and church needed to be pulled together. And so the Holy Roman Emperor pushes in 1050, 1049, something like that, this guy Leo IX. Well, Leo IX, he's a good guy, old guy, good guy, gathers around him a bunch of guys, these princes of the church, these cardinal figures, and so they become a scholar bureaucracy there in Rome that is going to, especially education and clergy reform, and get all sorts of good stuff going in the church and organize and, do those things Gregory did. Make it a system, because the government needs, especially this church system, to be running things in an orderly fashion so that the state is run well, and then also education and also we're going to talk more about education later with the development of universities, but getting this all organized. So the Pope's a key figure in this. Now, when the Pope dies, Leo IX, the Cardinals get together, and there's a couple of these lead Cardinals, and they like this Pope, but at the same time, they can never allow again the Emperor to name a Pope. They just think that's bad. That's actually a system more like the East and stuff. In the West, they want to create what we call separation of church and state. Not separation of church and state at the bottom level, but separation of church at the very highest level. The magistrate cannot be a churchman cannot be a magistrate. The two are not supposed to be separate, functioning with each other. Okay, I said that too strongly about the magistrate, but yeah, it's this spirit of separation that's so important. And then, so what they do is they do this. The Cardinals get together and declare an election decree, and the election basically is that Cardinals elect the Pope. Now you're going to ask, because you're smart, well, how do you get to be a Cardinal? And this is the fun part. Popes appoint Cardinals. So you have a completely closed system, and the whole goal of the closed system is to keep the Emperor out, keep these other political figures out. So this is why you have these very powerful Cardinals, okay? And Cardinals come from all over the world now, and they are this class of scholar bureaucrat who function in their own ways all around the world, but then they come together to elect the Pope. And so it's very important who the Cardinals are, and this is the still functioning election decree of 1059. Francis will come to his window here, but this is the New York Times. Francis looks at the developing world to appointing new cardinals. This is big news in the world, because here's this very world powerful figure, and he is broadening out the election base. For any pope, appointing cardinals is a chance to shape the direction and future of the universal church. Since the 120 members of the College of Cardinals elect the new pope, Francis was elected last year in March, and then he says he was successor to Benedict XVI. All right, and then here's another one. This is another time he's doing more cardinal stuff. About every year. If you're over 80 years old, you're supposed to no longer be a voting cardinal. Okay, that's this here. And so what you have is with the addition of 20 new cardinals, the College Cardinals has 228 members, including 103 that are over 80. Okay, so there's always a sort of fluctuating number there. But these 120, roughly, are supposed to be the guys who elect the Pope. And they elected this guy when I was in college, 1978. And he is, this is Saint Pope John Paul the Great. Okay, and there's now a college here in San Diego named after him. He is got to be this most amazing Pope ever, maybe. I think so. But the thing is that he died a few years back, and we got the situation, which is this new movie you have on. So I encourage you to watch it on Netflix. But this is the Pope that was elected, and for various reasons, Benedict XVI was, he's super smart, Germanic, but no fun and no friendly. And people loved John Paul II. They didn't love him. He had a lot of struggles. His health was getting bad. He liked to wear Gucci shoes. He sort of not, didn't really feel like he was leading the church well, and decided to retire. Now, you're supposed to be Pope till you die. And so the new Pope was elected, and that's what this movie sets up. Anthony Hopkins here and Francis there, and this very interesting relationship. We actually have, living in the Vatican, 2 popes. Very weird situation. But what we have is this elective monarchy. And so when Francis dies, he'll die soon because he's really old, and then Francis will die. You'll see this elective monarchy kick in again. And just remember, this is what makes, this comes out of Western civilization. This is the bishop of Rome. Bishops that were first empowered by Constantine to help rule the empire. Now there's this one bishop who actually has this independent power in the whole world, which is huge. And he has no army, you know. He just does it by the force of the church and the force of his personality. Okay. So take care, read up on read your other stuff. You're going to be reading my book, and I'll help you with that. Look for the video.